Good afternoon. Welcome to the March 5th meeting of the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission. Couple of things to take care of first. First, we need to welcome our newest member, Renee Duxler. I pronounced that right? Welcome. That puts us back at full strength, so glad that you're here. There will be no BZA meeting. They had no business on that, so we will bypass that. Before we do the minutes, let's have our public announcement, please.
Before we begin the agenda, the Wichita-Sedgwick County Metropolitan Area Planning Commission and the Wichita-Sedgwick County Board of Zoning Appeals would like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to this public hearing. Copies of the agenda for today's meeting, the public hearing procedure, and Planning Department staff reports on all agenda items are available in the lobby of this conference room. The Planning Commission's and the BZA's bylaws limit the applicant on a zoning, subdivision, or variance application and his or her representative to a total of 10 minutes of speaking time at the start of the hearing on that item, plus up to 2 minutes at the conclusion of that hearing. All other persons wishing to speak on agenda items are limited to 3 minutes per person. However, if they feel that it is needed and justified, the chairman may extend these times by up to 2 minutes. All speakers are requested to state his or her name and address for the record when beginning to speak. When you are finished speaking, please write your name, address, and the case number on the sheet provided in the lobby. This will enable staff to notify you if there are any additional proceedings concerning that item. Please note that all written and visual materials you present to the Commission and the Board will be retained by the Secretary as part of the official record. If you are not speaking but you wish to be notified about future proceedings on a particular case, please sign in on that same sheet. The Planning Commission and the Board are interested in hearing the views of all persons who wish to express themselves on the agenda items. However, we ask that all speakers please be as concise as possible and avoid long repetitions of facts or opinions which have already been stated. For your information, the Wichita City Council has adopted a policy for all city zoning items. A copy of this policy is available in the lobby. The City Council relies on a written record of the Planning Commission hearings and does not conduct its own additional public hearings on these items. The decision of the BZA is final. Any appeal of a decision of the BZA is to district court.
Okay, first order of business will be approval of the
Move for
minutes.
approval.
Second.
Okay, we have, that was quick. We have 4 abstentions. Ms. Duxler was not a member of the board at that point, and then Mr. Dooley, Ms. Gross, and Mr. Richardson were absent. So all those in favor of the motion signify with the upraised hand. Those opposed, passes unanimously, which is what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8, 0, 9, 0, 9, 0. Okay, we'll go through the agenda to see which items we can take by consent. The first agenda item is 2.1, a one-step final plat, Edgewater 4th Edition, located near West 45th Street North and North Hoover Road. Is there anybody on the commission want to hear that item? Seeing none, is there anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? Seeing none, we will take that by consent. We have a motion on that one.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mr. Green, second by Mr. Joe Johnson. All those in favor signify with the upraised hand. All opposed, that passes unanimously. Vacation items. Agenda item 3.1 is vacate a portion of a complete access control on property located near East 31st Street South and South Oliver. Is there anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? Seeing none, is there anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? Seeing none, we will take 3.1 by consent. Is there a motion on that?
Move for approval. Second.
Motion by Mr. Hartman, second by Mr. Florence. Okay. All those in favor signify with the upraised hand. Opposed? Same sign. It passes unanimously. Okay. Public hearing items. 4.1, a conditional use to permit an accessory apartment near North Oliver and East 93rd Street North. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item?
Mr. Chairman, I have a staff question on that item.
Okay, we have a staff question. Is there anybody on the board want to hear that other than the staff question? Anybody in the audience wish to hear item 4.1? So, okay, we'll hit that staff question first when we come back to it. Agenda item 4.2 is a CUP amendment, which would permit a nightclub and outdoor recreational and entertainment business located near the northeast corner of Greenwich Road and East 13th Street. Anybody on the board wish to hear that item? We will hear that item. Agenda item 4.3 is a zone change for limited commercial to limited industrial located near 47th Street South and K15. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? We will hear that item. Okay, and then, okay, we need to hear those last two, so, yes. Okay. Okay, so the first question on 4.1. Kathy Morgan has taken that one. Mr. Foster, your question.
Kathy, I just want to confirm on the first page of the staff report, it indicates this as an interior lot. Is there provision or do you know of a covenant that provides for access to the property? And I couldn't.
There's an easement that allows that road to go back in. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I just wanted to confirm that there was access.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because that's one of maybe 3 houses back in there, and so there's an easement off that.
That's all I needed. Thank you.
So is there anybody on the commission wish to hear that item now? Anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? If not, is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Motion by Mr. Green, second by Mr.
Second.
Hartman. Okay. All those in favor signify with the upraised hand. Motion passes unanimously. Agenda item 4.2. Philip, I understand you're covering for Dave.
Yes, sir. Philip Ziebenbergen, Associate Planner with Planning Staff on behalf of Dave Yearout, who is not in the office today. Let me get to the slide real quick. There we go. CUP 2020-03, the applicant is looking to create a new CUP called the 13th and Greenwich Community Unit Plan. It'll be DP 224. In order to do this, they're actually combining 2 existing CUPs at the northeast corner of 13th and Greenwich. You have the Dillon's 13th and Greenwich CUP, which is DP 224, and that designation will be retained, as well as the Chapel Hill CUP DP 349. That one will cease to exist when it's combined into the whole. The property is zoned, as you can see on the zoning map, limited commercial. There's no rezone associated with the CUP. It'll retain the existing zoning. The purpose of the new CUP, again, is not only to expand the breadth of the CUP in terms of land area, but also to provide the opportunity for new uses overall. With the new CUP, there will be a different configuration of parcels. On the CUP drawing here, you can see there will be 11 parcels and a reserve, the reserve being the internal circulation through the larger section between Greenwich and Chapel Hill. The majority of the language of the previous CUPs is pretty consistent with what's proposed to be new. In light of that, I'm just going to be focusing on what's changing and what's new related to this. Under General Provision 3B, certain type of uses are being added to the permitted uses on the site, specifically taverns and drinking establishments, clubs, nightclubs in the city, entertainment establishment in the city, and recreation and entertainment outdoor. Those will be allowed on parcels 1, 2, and then 5 through 11 on the site. Any outdoor uses will cease operation by 2 a.m. A site plan will be required for the outdoor recreation and entertainment. That will be submitted to the planning department for approval prior to the issuance of any building permits. The proposed use for the largest parcel here, parcel 11, is an outdoor golf driving range. It will also include a full-service restaurant, bar, event space, entertainment complex, and a mini golf, as well as outdoor seating and dining opportunities. That is the bulk of why all those new permitted uses are part of the language of the CUP, is to cover this new kind of event and entertainment destination that is proposed to be developed throughout the CUP. One interesting thing to note about it is the poles that will be constructed to house the netting, the protective netting, to make sure, golf balls don't go across the street, are proposed to be 150 feet tall. This land is within an airport hazard zone. It's in Zone B, which is in the approach pattern to the Raytheon Airport of the Hawker Beechcraft area near Central and Greenwich. The airport hazard zone that it is in restricts the height of any structure to 75 feet. So in order to have these proposed poles constructed, that will take a waiver from the Wichita City Council. This case would have to go to City Council anyway for final approval, but part of that approval process through them is the waiver of that height restriction of that for 75 feet in order for them to build the poles to a height of 150 feet. While we're on that note, in the staff report, there's actually a correction. In the general provisions, it states they're 150 feet, but when Dave got to his analysis after the general provisions, he stated them as 170 feet. That should be corrected. It is, I confirmed with the applicant this morning that it is 150 feet. So if you see that discrepancy in the staff report, I just wanted to call your attention to that. The applicant will also be needing to seek approval from the FAA. They're doing this concurrently. City Council has to approve it, but also has to get the approval from the FAA for the height of those poles as well. All the language for architectural controls, landscaping on the site are per the code. Regarding lighting, all the parcels will be allowed to have light poles up to 30 feet, including the ground bases. An interesting thing to note as well that differs is that on this parcel 11 here where the driving range is proposed, they're going to be allowed to have exposed LED strip lights. Those will be for the driving bays. They will not be cutoff lights. They'll actually be just directionally oriented to those driving bays, and they'll be allowed to be there in conjunction with regular operation. A lighting master plan will be provided to the planning department as well as MAPC for approval prior to the installation of those lights. Screening was addressed in this CUP. As we'll see here on the zoning map, or as we saw on the zoning map, the property to the north of the bulk of the CUP, as well as this property here, north of the other portion of the CUP, are zoned residential. A 6 to 8 foot screening wall should be provided, but there is language in there that says that they can substitute dense landscaping that can consist of evergreen trees on top of a berm with shrubs and deciduous trees as well. So that's along the north property line. There's also this portion of the east property line along Chapel Hill Street that is across the street from this church property that's zoned residential as well. There is provision in there for screening along a portion of that east line in relation to the zoning across the street. Something to mention about signage. The really only major thing to note about signage is this is an exhibit that the applicant submitted. This is going southbound on K96. This is the exit ramp for 13th Street. This is that church property. So really you're looking further to the west over top of it, but they would have signage along K96 over here on the eastern part of the CUP. Staff is permitting them to have 2 signs that are 70 feet tall. This is also something that's pretty consistent regarding the Warren Theater development that's on the south side of 13th Street. The reason for the higher height than usual for those signs is because of these existing trees and the right-of-way for the highway, in addition to the grade separation of K96 as it goes under 13th Street. So we're allowing those heights. As I said before, it was something that is consistent with what was permitted on the south side for the development of the Warren Theater commercial area on the other side of 13th Street. Overall, those are the major differences between the two CUPs related to what's proposed to be new with this one. Going back to the zoning map, we'll kind of complete the square here. As I mentioned before, to the north is in technically Sedgwick County and it's zone SF20, but it's vacant land. It's not developed right now. North of the Chapel Hill CUP is SF5, single family, and it's a church. South of 13th Street is limited commercial, and I'm sure you're all fairly familiar with all the restaurants that are developed there, as well as the Warren Theater East. To the west of the property, most of it's zone limited industrial. There's a little bit of general commercial here. Most of those are car lots. This parcel here is zone limited commercial and it's a bank. So overall, staff feels that this is a fairly consistent development with the area and an appropriate location for development of this kind based on what's going on around it. The subject property has had a history of many zoning actions as with rezonings and different plats. As we mentioned before, there are 2 different CUPs that have gone through and been approved, as well as their associated plats that went along with them. This property, in conjunction with the CUP case, is going to be having a replatting. It's currently the Dillon's 12th edition, and it will be changing to the 13th and Greenwich edition with case 2020-01 of the subdivision. And that's currently working on and will be finalized in relation to the CUP as well. In relation to the comprehensive plan, the comprehensive plan identifies this area as a residential and employment mix based on the location guidelines and development pattern guidelines. The overall intent of the CUP is consistent with the guidelines of the comprehensive plan. Overall, staff is recommending approval of this subject to the conditions that the development guidelines be adhered to, and that the applicant submit the necessary copies of the approved CUP to planning staff and register a document with this register or record a document with the Register of Deeds regarding the development guidelines for this. With that, I can stand for any staff questions.
Questions, Phil, Mr. Richardson?
Philip, regarding the compatibility setbacks, I understand the need to eliminate those between the parcels. Does that also apply to the single-family zoning on the north?
I do not believe so. Let me.
I mean, the way it's written, it would essentially exempt from all directions, I think, and I'm not sure that's what they intend. It just says it'll be waived on all parcels under 3D.
Gotcha, under 3D. I'm hearing from the agent from the applicant. He said that he can clarify that language for you, so I'll defer to him.
All right. Have you heard anything at all from the church about the lighting from the golf facility, should it be built, since these are, in effect, directional lights, evidently heading their way?
In staff meeting this week, when we were talking about this planning commission case today, Dave did not mention anything from any surrounding property owners of any concerns. So I really don't know. Scott, I don't know if you've talked to Dave and.
No, we've not had any conversations with the church at all. They've not contacted us.
Okay, and the DAB has not heard this yet, is that right?
No, it has not heard. It goes on March 19th.
Okay. Okay, that's it for now. I've got some for the applicant, but.
Mr. Foster?
Philip, on page 4 of staff report, item 3D, compatibility setback standards, height standards, and noise standards are waived on all parcels. Does that mean, we've talked about noise standards in the past being on a complaint-driven basis. Does that mean that no one can complain about if there's a noise problem? What
Scott, can I defer to you on this?
The noise standard of the Unified Zoning Code is very stringent, as we've talked about in the past. It essentially says that any sound that is generated by electronic equipment cannot be heard on any property zoned SF5 or SF20 within 500 feet of the subject property. So that standard people would not be able to complain about. There is, however, city does have a noise ordinance that has a much higher threshold that you would trigger, but that is still applicable. And that's not actually in the zoning code, but in a separate segment of the zoning code. And that is most commonly the noise complaints that we do get and do follow up on. And it does not apply. It doesn't matter what your property is zoned. If you exceed those noise thresholds, then that would be a violation of the city's ordinance and could be cited in municipal court.
Similar question, does that mean the setback and the height ones are set aside as well?
The way it's worded here, yes, it looks to me like that's the way it's worded, and it sounded like the applicant was going to address the intent of that, and we may need to reword that slightly based on their conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, Philip. Would the agent or applicant like to come forward, please? State your name and address for the record, and you will have 10 minutes.
Good afternoon, Brian Lideback, MKEC Engineering, 411 North Webb Road, on behalf of the owners and the applicant. For starters, we are in agreement with staff comments, and I think we've got a good case here. It's really a cleaning house and unifying these two CUPs together, and then modernizing the language of the former Dillon CUP. I remember working across the street when I first started at MKEC years and years ago. I think that was this Dillon's property was undeveloped at that time, and the CUP was there, and so it'd be good to see some development activity here. This CUP will certainly encourage and help that along. As far as your concerns or questions about the compatibility standards, I think everybody understands that this is an entertainment corridor. There's a lot of entertainment going on in this area. Certainly, there's also large light poles along the K96 corridor. Those poles, I think, are in excess of 100 feet tall. Not to mention, there's a lot of highway traffic along the highway, and of course, the arterial roads with all the people coming and going in this commercial corridor. We didn't see that it was appropriate to have those compatibility standards for this situation, and further, it would cause a hardship on this parcel 11 that you see on the north with regard to the types of activities we would anticipate there. So those are the reasons why we've eliminated those compatibility standards, and I can certainly answer any other questions you might have on that. And to answer the question about the church, the applicant is here. They did reach out to the church, and they are okay with what is planned for this parcel.
Questions for Brian?
Brian, the height compatibility standards on the north, are you asking those to be waived primarily because of the potential of the golf facility and the 150-foot poles? I understand it might be a hardship here, but the land to the north still zones single family, and we don't know what's going to go in there. Tell me why you need the height setback waived on the north side, and can we be more specific about that?
Sure. As you can see, this northern edge is where not light poles, but netting poles would be in that general vicinity. And those are, of course, as the staff report says, are proposed to be 150 feet tall. So obviously that would be a problem. And we see that, as a necessity for this case.
Well, perhaps we could allow the waiving of setback standards for essentially that's a see-through netting, in some sense. My concern is about, we're also going to allow any kind of building to be built there if we just waive them completely. I don't think that's the intent of the development, is to have a multi-story building there, except whatever what you read in the press says the golf facility is going to be one story. I don't know what it's going to be, and that's not our concern, but is to waive those setbacks for the poles in some way. And I don't know, Scott, whether we can be that specific. or not. My concern's just about buildings. I understand that the poles are gonna be 150 feet.
Well, buildings, I mean, we want maximum flexibility for this parcel. You know, while you may read things in the press, that's not necessarily always what has to be. There's certainly, we want the ability to develop this land in a manner that would benefit the city of Wichita in maximizing density. As you know, there's very limited parcels in East Wichita left, and so I think the comp plan would support going vertical, and we would also support going vertical on this site. It's got great access to highways, it's great access to arterial streets, it's an entertainment area. It's just, it's to me, it doesn't make any sense not to. It's surrounded by general industrial and industrial properties. Anyways, I can keep going.
About the 70-foot signs on K-96, are those intended to be monument signs? I mean, the picture's so far away, I couldn't tell what they're supposed to be like. My concern is, essentially a billboard, 2 billboards there that scream at you all night long, and there are none of those along K-96 at this point. One of the nice things about K-96 is it is sort of bereft of those kinds of billboards.
Yeah,
is that the plan here?
These are not billboards. This does not allow for off-site signs. These are internal parcels signage, and I put together the CUP up there at the Entertainment Destinations at K-96 years ago, and we allowed for 4 large signs. Those large signs are now built. This is no different than that site, and I would expect that you'll have quality signage that is just like, maybe not just like, but it'll be similar to what you see on the other side of the road. What you see in the picture is this is actually the same monument as it is across the street. We've just added some additional height to it because our initial look at this, we looked at putting in a 50-foot sign, and we'd actually originally proposed that, but as we started looking at this study, it's really become ineffective. And when you're spending $100,000-$200,000 on a sign, it's not something you want to do, and it not being effective. So this allows the sign to be effective, and I think that that's what we want to see in our community is people that are visiting from outside. I was just in Omaha the other day. They have a lot of great signs along the highways, and I don't think it's anything that we wouldn't expect to see here in Wichita.
Additional questions? Mr. Foster?
Three questions. Over the years, we've heard of environmental concerns for this particular site. Have those been addressed?
You're thinking of the site to the north that has environmental concerns. Any concerns that were on this site are no longer a concern. I'm also aware there are some restrictions on the property to the north as far as development activity.
Okay, thank you. Second question is, on page 5 of the staff report, 7E, the screening is referenced there on the east side there, but it says except the north 60 feet. Why would that be when that's probably the most critical spot for the screening?
At the time, there's there's a lot of utilities in that corridor, and the idea would be that would allow for an access point up there to that back parcel. So that's the reason why we accepted that out. But yeah, we would be creating screening along that northern edge where it abuts the property to the east rather.
Is that mainly in maintenance access?
It could be, maintenance access, could be a maintenance type corridor. It wouldn't, obviously being back in the corner, it wouldn't be a major opening. But we thought having that set out now would be something good to have that as a forethought item, as opposed to coming back before you and asking for something different when we need to be able to have access back there.
I'll have a question for staff on that later. Third question is, actually, it's the graphic here. To the right of the one sign in the foreground there's a group of crosses that I've heard are an identity element for the church. My question is, it appears that the pylon sign is in front of that or north of that.
It's behind it.
Okay, I just want
Yeah.
to confirm that. It's okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Additional questions for Brian. Mr. Richardson?
What's the maximum height in LC, Brian?
It's 80 feet as far as buildings.
80 or 85?
80 feet.
80, okay.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Open the floor to anybody from the audience. Anybody in the audience want to speak to this item, come forward to the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and you will have 3 minutes. Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission. Mr. Foster?
I do have a question for Mr. Richardson. Do you think it'd be appropriate on that 150 foot along the north side, if you look at the site plan, to perhaps consider, I think you mentioned the idea of getting a little bit tighter on that item?
Well, you know, if the site plan is reasonably accurate, those poles are set back, and maybe Brian can answer that, are set back pretty far from the north if you look at that site plan. Yeah, could he, Mr. Chairman, could Brian speak to that? Yeah.
There is a sewer line and a utility corridor at the north end, and that's about 25 feet. Likewise, we'll need that 25 feet for our landscaping and our wall to be fit in that space. So those poles are set back off of that property line about that distance.
Yeah.
But it is, like I said, this is a critical component to the CUP, having those compatibilities. And I would just reiterate that there are deed restrictions on that property to the north for different types of uses.
To the north there is?
Yes.
What kind of restrictions are there, Brian?
I'm not prepared to discuss all those, but I do know that there are several deed restrictions, and I think some of those restrictions are limiting residential.
As to the types of residential, you mean?
Yeah, it limits, I know there are parts of it that limit the residential development activities.
Okay.
Mr. Johnson?
I move for approval with staff recommendations. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Motion by Mr. Johnson, second by Mr. Green. Additional questions or comments?
Does that include the 150-foot change to the poles? Or wasn't it listed?
That was part of the staff report, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, there was just, the general provisions state 150 feet, so that's, there was just a typo in the staff portion of the staff report, so 150 feet is correct and does not have to be part of the motion.
Yeah, okay. Those in favor of the motion signify with the upraised hand. Those opposed, it passes unanimously. That was 4.2. Next item, agenda item 4.3, zone change from limited commercial to limited industrial.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Kathy Morgan for Dave Year Out. This is a zone change, as you said, from limited commercial to limited industrial. It is, as you can see, it's the property outlined here. What you see in this little piece here is a billboard, so that's accepted out of the zone change area. And the applicant is wanting to develop the property with future use as light industrial uses. As you can see, the property to the north is limited industrial. You have some limited commercial down to the south and to the southwest, and then you have the railroad tracks to the east. Let's see, there's public services are provided to this area along 47th Street, which is a main arterial. There's also water lines along Clifton, and other issues with utilities will be addressed in the platting process for this. This will be platted, and it's currently in the unincorporated area of the county. The staff report, staff supports this change in zoning. Then it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. As I said, you can see the industrial and commercial uses in the area. Here's a aerial of the property. Come on. And as you can see on the future growth map, that is within the commercial growth area in this part of the county. And it's unimproved at this time. This is just different photos of the site. This is that billboard that you see over here in on the site map that shows that that's not part of the legal description. This is looking east at the site. This is a Quick Trip shop that's south of the site. The residential west of the site across Clifton. And this is looking east along 47th toward K-15 and the railroad tracks. And this is the Dollar General, the commercial development that's down there in that area. And looking north along Clifton from the northwest corner of the property. So staff is recommending that the zone change be approved from limited commercial to limited industrial. And I'll try and answer any questions you may have.
Questions for Kathy? Ms. Florence?
Is the owner of this property, don't he own the property to the north also?
I don't know that. Scott, do you?
I believe that's what the staff report says. I don't know that
Let's see.
other than,
I thought I read that in there too. Let's see.
yeah, Commissioner Richardson is confirming that he does.
Okay.
Ms. Miles?
Kathy, can you just give me a quick update on what all could be built in a limited industrial area?
Any kind of limited industrial has uses for car lots, manufacturing of certain types. There are other uses allowed that are allowed in limited commercial. It's just the more intensive use of being able to manufacture certain things in that zoning district.
Any additional questions for Kathy? Seeing none, thank you. Agent or applicant, if you'd like to come forward, please. You will have 10 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record.
Do you want any specific? I messed it up.
Russ Avey, agent for the applicant with Boffman Company, 315 South Ellis. Just to address something really quick here, this is not also my case, but my remembrance of it is this is actually one parcel that's split zoned. So there isn't two parcels. It's just the south 2/3 of the parcel that's split zone to LC. My understanding is that the applicant would then own up to the school, if that was the question. And the only intended use that I've been privy to is distribution warehouse type of use for the subject property. I have not heard of any type of manufacturing use, but I can't be 100% confident in that. So I'll stand for any questions. I believe there are members of the audience here to speak as well.
Any questions for us? Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody else like to speak on this issue? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and you will have 3 minutes.
Maureen Swope, 3600 East 47th Street South. Mainly what I was going to talk about is, I don't know if you can answer my questions yet. What really is going to happen to my property is actually right directly adjacent to where he's doing it. In the front corner, of course, of that 47th and Clifton. My concern is the back property. Will that affect any of the, changes in tax assessment, et cetera, my value of my property with the change in the zoning? So that was the main thing. And then the other thing would be, and I don't think you guys can answer that today, is how would it affect the drainage and all that? We had to go through a lot to get our drainage in this section. Let me get it back here. This small section right here is our drainage ditch that we had to have in there to have, for rain and everything like that to do it. And I didn't know how that would affect all our property on that. So those are just mainly the two questions that I had on that.
Justin, you want to answer the question on assessment?
Sure, I'll do my best. And I guess to point out that, Justin Wagoner, Assistant County Counselor. The county appraiser's office is who would determine value for each parcel. And I guess I would say they do it on a parcel by parcel basis. So it's not, all right. And so I can't tell you that wouldn't be a factor, but I don't know that that is a factor in this planning commission's review of this case, but it usually is the use of your property and how it's being used, not necessarily the zoning around there, but I can't say that that doesn't at all factor into the appraiser's office calculation. So.
Okay.
And then who wants to take a stab just saying the rules on drainage and,
The property, as the commission knows, but for the speaker's benefit, what is being brought to you today is a request for a zone change.
Right.
Prior to them being able to build any structures on this property, they will have to go through a process called platting. And at that stage, the drainage plan for the property will be designed, and I'm sure that they'll have to do some on-site improvements as well to address drainage like you did.
So that will have to be at a later date. That's what you're telling me.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
There'll be another hearing that discusses that.
All right.
does
Thank
anybody
you.
have questions for the speaker? If not, thank you, ma'am. Does anybody else wish to speak on this issue? Saying none, I'll bring it back to the commission.
Move for approval, subject to staff comments.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Hartman, a second by Mr. Foster. Any additional questions or comments? Seeing none, those in favor signify with the upraised hand. Those opposed, same sign. So how many we got total? We got 12, so I got 10-2. Oh, you're, okay, 11-1. Favor 11-1, okay. That takes care of those items. Next will be a hearing on agenda item 5.1.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. Scott Knable with planning staff for the record. Item 5.1 is a request for you to set a public hearing to consider amending the subdivision regulations. We're requesting that that public hearing be set for April 9th, so not the next meeting, but the meeting after next. The two items that are proposed for consideration at that hearing on the 9th is one is a removal of the requirement from the subdivision regulations to conduct what's called a safe yield analysis for residential plats of larger than one lot in the urban growth area and unincorporated area of Sedgwick County. This was something that was added to the subdivision regulations in 2004. And last year, the planning staff was approached by the development community asking for this item to be reviewed in terms of its effectiveness. And based on that review, and there have been conversations both at the subdivision committee on a couple of occasions and a presentation to the planning commission on October 24th, it's been determined by the licensed professionals who are qualified to prepare this safe yield analysis that the safe yield analysis does not accomplish the stated purpose of the subdivision regulations for which it is being required. The stated purpose is that it is to demonstrate that there is available quality and quantity of on-site water service in the platted parcels, and the safe yield analysis does not provide that assurance. It is just not a tool that is designed to provide that kind of assurance. So the recommendation, as you can see, that we will discuss in detail on the 9th is that requirement be removed from the subdivision regulations. The second item that is recommended for consideration on the 9th is an item that was discussed at the Board of County Commissioners staff meeting on January 14th related to special assessment financing for petition for infrastructure that's required by the subdivision regulations. The discussion on the 14th related to the term of those special assessments being a 15-year term. The proposed amendment that we're asking you to consider is that the subdivision regulations be amended to state that the petitions for Sedgwick County that involve special assessment financing of improvements, the term of those should be consistent with the Sedgwick County debt financing policy. So the subdivision regulations themselves actually would not set that term. That separate policy would, and of course the policy could state 15 or some other term. As my understanding, the policy currently states that the term would be 15 years. So recommendation today is that you set the public hearing for April 9th to consider these two amendments to the code. We will, assuming you take that action, we will publish in the newspapers an advertisement regarding that hearing, and then at that hearing on the 9th, everybody who has an interest in the item will be able to speak to you and express their interest.
I move we set a special hearing on April 9th.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Motion by Mr. Johnson, second by Ms. Miles. Questions?
Hey, Scott, on the term for the special assessment financing, could you clarify that the county debt financing policy, they have theirs set at 15-year or?
As I understand it, that's correct. I was hoping to have a chance to pull that up before this meeting, and I did not get to look at it. I'm more familiar with the city's policy, and the city's policy is a standard of 15 years with a provision for a 20-year assessment based on a special review. But I believe the county's is just a 15-year. Perhaps Justin can confirm that.
Justin Wagoner, Assistant County Counselor. Yes, Scott's assessment's correct. The way that it's worded in the county is that it says that the county normally shall issue bonds, and it goes on. There's some other items addressed, and then it says, and 15 years or less for special assessment bonds. State law would allow those special assessment bonds to be up to 20 years, but the typical policy is to have them capped at 15 years. So the intent behind this, as Scott was saying, would be to put folks on notice, developers on notice, as to there is a county policy on this, and then they could refer to that.
Perfect, thanks.
Mr. Foster?
Scott, in the background information, second paragraph, it refers to what is the best way to do so, including comments from the real estate industry. What comments were received from the real estate industry? I don't see any in the report.
We did not receive any comments from the real estate industry. That was the direction that we were given. We put it out that we were interested in finding out what people's interest was in this, and we did not receive comments from them.
How do we go about contacting the real estate industry to let them know that this is being?
I mean, if you include in your motion that there be some formal notice to real estate industry, whatever that might mean, we can attempt to accomplish that. And maybe perhaps there's some organizations that you want us to send notice of the hearing to.
Okay, certainly I would think that the Home Builders Association, I mean, you've got 15, I think, is a standard. Most developers would like to keep it within that, but the flip side of that is as special assessments go up, the viability of their projects can be affected by the amount of the monthly special assessment. So I'm a little bit concerned about putting a flat cap without the possibility of a review situation to allow for that. So I would think that certainly the Association of Realtors, Home Builders Association, but two that come to mind that need to be notified that this is being considered, and let them weigh in on the pros and cons of this kind of a policy.
That sounds good. If we can include that in the motion, we'd be glad to do that.
Yeah, and I think what we're doing is trying to avoid that. I mean, what we're saying is let's don't limit it by the subdivision regulations and let's let the county decide, because they're going to have the ultimate decision anyway.
Right. The direction to amend the subdivision regulations to include this came from the Board of County Commissioners.
Right, because it has 15 years, but if they want something else, then there's no sense to have to come back to the subdivision regulations to do that. So
yeah, I mean,
it makes sense just to say whatever the county policy is what we do, and if they decide to expand it, then fine and dandy.
Yeah, I mean, if you ask my personal opinion, adding this sentence to the subdivision regulations, that really doesn't impact whether the county has a policy or not. It's just a statement that there is one.
Yeah, right.
I mean, the only thing it really does is it then ties the county to having that policy, because they put in an ordinance or a resolution that there will be one. Yeah. So they wouldn't be able to rescind it without amending the subdivision regulations to get rid of it altogether.
Yeah, I'm confused now. So if somebody wanted to develop a project and they needed, in order to keep the amount of specials down, they go to a 20-year special assessment versus a 15-year, they could do that, or would these rules and regulations prohibit them?
They would be able to do it as long as the Sedgwick County debt financing policy allowed it, but stating that in the subdivision regulations really doesn't impact whether or not that Sedgwick County debt policy is impactful or not. It's just essentially a notice to people that there is such a thing, and you should look it up and know what it is when you plat a property.
And Commissioner Warren, I guess if I would add in, the county it'd be up to the county commission under that. They could still grant it up to the 20 years if they, on a case-by-case basis, if they would elect to do so. It would be making folks aware that the staff recommendation it's a finance policy from county finance, is a 15-year cap, but it wouldn't prevent them from going up to 20 years if the Board of County Commissioners allowed it.
It just sounds to me like Wichita states that's an option, and it sounds like the county's wanting to take that wording out, that it's an option.
Yeah, there wouldn't be any impact of the Planning Commission's action on amending the subdivision regulations as to what the wording of the Sedgwick County debt financing policy says. That's beyond the purview of this commission and the subdivision regulations. It's merely adding a reference to the subdivision regulations that there is such a policy.
We have a motion, a second. Any further discussion on the motion?
Did we want to add the language for the real estate and
I would like to have at least those entities brought up to speed. So if we could add the realtors and the builder association notification that this hearing will be taking place, would the motion allow for that to be a part of their?
it would be you, Joe?
Yeah. Okay. Second concurs with that. Okay. Is there anybody from the audience who wishes to speak on this issue? Can we do that, or is this we just?
Yeah, I mean, the public hearing will be on April 9th.
Those in favor of the motion signify with the upraised hand. Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Next item.
Right, item 5.2 is a request for your review of a project plan for the Chester I. Lewis Reflection Square Park project, which is located within the Center City South redevelopment district. Center City South redevelopment district was created in May of 2017 and is divided into 14 project areas. This particular project is project area 3B. There have been, and I'll let Mark Elder, who's going to make most of the presentation, address this, but there have been a number of existing projects developed in this, including the project that involved the Interest Bank Arena, project that involved the Ambassador Hotel, and other projects in what was called Block 1, as well as, I believe there was one other project area in this that has been undertaken. The proposed project is associated with the repurposing of what was at one time called the Finney State Office Building, and some adjoining properties that a development team has acquired and assembled in the area. And the proposed development would be to create what's called the Health Science Center, which would include a medical school, as well as student housing, a hotel, and a culinary center in the redevelopment of, or not redevelopment, but revitalization, reuse of 5 existing buildings in and around the Chester I. Lewis Reflection Square Park. The use of the TIF would be used to redevelop the park. It's a park that was developed at the time the Finney State Office Building was originally developed, and so it is about 25 years old and is in need of refreshment, if you will, in terms of its condition. There's also a plan to provide a entrance to the Health Science Center that would go through a property that is being demolished on Douglas, and would provide an entrance to that building, to that development on Douglas, alongside and through this park. There's also a proposal to use TIF funding for infrastructure and landscape improvements in the area. In terms of the consistency with the comprehensive plan, this project area 3B falls within the project downtown master plan, and it is specifically identified in the Douglas corridor, which is one of the 15 unique districts. That Douglas corridor recommends that there be a continuous walkability with appropriate development and infrastructure. And this Chester I. Lewis Reflection Square Park's also identified in that plan as a park that could need some additional improvement. So planning staff has found that the proposed project plan for Chester I. Lewis Reflection Square Park is consistent with the project downtown master plan, and is recommending that the Planning Commission find the same. Mark Elder with the city's Economic Development Office is here to explain more detail the proposed use of the TIF funds for redevelopment of this park.
Scott,
Yes.
go ahead.
Yes. Okay.
Good afternoon, Mark Elder with the City of Wichita's Office of Economic Development. This presentation, it's fairly brief. Scott covered quite a bit of what we'll be discussing, but I want to kind of give an overlay of the situation of the overall Center City Park, and I've highlighted in red here Area 3B, which is what we will be talking about today. You can see that there are 12 other project areas that have been designated as Scott said. I believe there are 3 to 4 projects currently within that. This is a zoomed in area of the project area 3B that we're discussing today. Just kind of as a side note, the area that's in the boundary in red and hash marked is a property that's excluded from the actual project area for the purpose of this redevelopment TIF. This project, as Scott had mentioned, is based on a private development of revitalizing those 4 buildings, the State Office Building and the Kansas Health Science Center, which will have access to the east of the park, as well as the former Sutton Building, which will be student housing that supports that Kansas Health Science Center. The Broadway Plaza, which is right there at the corner of Douglas and Broadway, will be converted into a 119-room hotel, as well as the former Henry's Building, which is part of the project, but is actually in the separate Block 1 project area as far as TIF's concerned, will also be revitalized into a commercial kitchen and culinary school. This project with Chester I. Lewis Reflection Park, there will be primarily repair and updates to the park. There's not going to be any like drastic changes to the park, but it will open up, create a larger gathering space, and make it inviting to the public, but will still retain the historic and cultural elements that are within the park today. The city will also be acquiring a portion. There's a building directly on the east side of the park that is owned by this developer that's doing the whole project. It will be demolished, and a portion that will be acquired to expand that park. The rear, approximately third of that property, is what Scott had mentioned, will be used as kind of an second-story mezzanine access to that Kansas Health Science Center. So they'll be retaining that, but the rest of it will be acquired by the city to expand that park and make those improvements there as well. Again, this is the park as it exists today, and you can see that building on the east side there that would be removed. And these are just concept. The city's actually in the process of having a design team. They'll come in and help with that design concept, but you can see that it does open up the park a little bit on there. On the back side there, you can see that glass enclosure, which is, again, on the private side of that development. But again, you can see it's nothing too drastic aside from the improvements. And again, here is just kind of aerial, again, concept only as we go through with that. But the project plan identifies that for the park redevelopment, there would be TIF bonds issued for $1.3 million. So that would be the kind of the cap on what would be occurring on the project. But the plan does allow for an additional $1 million for infrastructure improvements as pay-as-you-go. And really what that means is that while within that project area, if there are other things that the city needs to do as far as improving the landscape and the sidewalks, any improvements to underground utilities as well, if the project exceeds what's needed to pay for those bonds, that additional funds could be used to make additional improvements to the public infrastructure within that area. And that concludes that, but I will stand for any questions regarding this project.
Any questions for Mr. Elder? Mr. Richardson?
The part that's excluded, is that because that TIF increment's being used for something else?
Those buildings will have a property tax abatement on those for a while, and you can't have an abatement within a project area, so they're excluded for that purpose.
Right. Thank you.
Additional questions? Mr. Newell? Bob, you want to speak to the microphone, please?
Yes, the project has been in the news for some time, and just for my own benefit, can you tell me what action the city council has taken on this up to this point?
As far as the overall project, not necessarily this TIF, or how it relates to this TIF?
The overall project. Financing already approved, I believe, hasn't there?
Correct. So last year is when the majority of that action did occur for this project. And so within that time frame, City Council did approve some facade improvements as well as asbestos remediation on those four buildings. Then they also approved a development agreement, which includes the overall project, a parking lease, community improvement districts, as well as kind of included back into it the asbestos and facade projects is kind of just wrapping them all into one bundle, as well as industrial revenue bonds that we spoke about as far as that abatement. But in that agreement, it did state that the city would also consider a TIF project plan for the purpose of revitalizing this park at the same time. But so this is, in a way, more or less the last step in what all has been going on with this process for the project.
Additional questions from Mr. Elder? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve staff's recommendation?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Green, second by Mr. Richardson. All those in favor signify with the upraised hand. Those opposed? Passes unanimously. I'm not seeing any. One abstention?
Yeah.
Yes,
One
Mr. Johnson, he left, so, yeah. Yeah.
11-0.
Yeah. If I don't see any additional action, we stand adjourned.